Well, the differences are in the magnitude. If you look back 50 years, when we played, there was a 32-man roster. And it didn't matter if you were all pro or not, you were on 2 or 3 special teams at all times. And I have one question for you right off the top. How many punts have you ever covered? Zero. You see? In my day, I've calculated it coming into this interview that I ran about 40,000 yards of wind sprints covering punts. I figured I could have played 20 years if I only had to play first and second down.
That's so far out of my world, it's not even funny.
Yeah, and I knew that you probably hadn't covered any punts, and so you have to have asterisks by the old centers. We used to do it all, right? And stuff like that.
So what was your average playing weight then?
When I came to the Lions, I was around 232 in my heyday. When I used to pull from the center position and lead the sweep. I was 245, and then everybody got heavier and heavier, and they went to the odd man defenses. So I finished off at about 258, and I've tried to stay down there ever since, but it's been a little tough.
Wow, yeah, so a gradual increase in weight throughout your career then?
You had to, just
to evolve with it. And
defensive linemen were 250 to 300, and they're big pushers, right?
Right, exactly.
So you had to anchor your butt and get ready.
Yeah, well, I guess it's been a steady increase now because I'm 300, 305.
305. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and I'm one of the lighter guys we got, too. So.
We would have had to put a license plate on you.
Right.
To count you.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, one of the other, I know we're here to talk about differences. You ever heard of the Eastern Swing?
No.
Yeah, see, you're so young, so young. The Eastern Swing is when we used to play 2 games in 3 days. We would fly back east. We'd play a game in Ottawa, and I remember this. We lost 6 players, got injured. We phoned up the invisible taxi squad and had 6 players flown out, and we flew to Hamilton the next day, did a walkthrough, and then took those 6 players and put them on the roster because they arrived game day, and we beat Hamilton.
Wow.
Now, you think how beat up you are in playing 2 games in 3 days? What was the only advantage of that?
I have no idea.
2 paychecks.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Double pay for the week.
Pay, right?
Yeah.
You felt like smokes. You know what, but
yeah, a short week.
A good time.
A short week for us is about 5-day turnover, and we're complaining about that. So I might shut my mouth a little bit more now.
Well, you tell me something about what it's like to play now.
You know, comparing to what you said about the size of players, I'm definitely going up against guys that are quite large, probably compared to back then. There's some D-linemen that are 340, kind of size and fast. So that was, I struggled coming out of university. I got drafted to Winnipeg. I was in Winnipeg for 6 years. And for me, it was like the D-linemen were so much bigger, but they were equally as fast as anybody I'd played with before. So, the speed and the size, I would say, of the D-lineman is probably...
Yeah. We had quickness, too, like the guys like John Helton. We had guys like Granville Liggins, and he was so quick he was only like 5'11". They listed him as 6'1", but I don't know if he hit 6 feet, but he was only 235 pounds. But he was quick like a cat. Right. And you know what he used to do to me?
What's that?
He'd shade me to my snap hand, and then he'd come at my snap hand, and he knew he was one-on-one.
A half second slower than your other.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I saw a film where he had a head slap upside my head, and the ball was still between my legs trying to give it to the quarterback. Those were interesting days.
Yeah. So what was film study like during your career?
Film study was quite intense. We actually did. We broke it down play by play, frame by frame on a number of different instances. And we knew, and anticipation was a big part of our game, right? Like we'd know the formations. We'd know if Hamilton was going to do a double twist Mac delay, what you're talking about, a dog delay there earlier. Yeah. Hamilton used to do a tackle twist, which was pretty simple, but then they'd have a Mac delay with Ben Zambiazzi, who was a great middle linebacker, and we had to be very careful on how we handled that off and then get to the hole where the linebacker was going to come, because he had a choice. He had a choice. up to us. So I think anticipation on the offensive line, knowing what's in front of you and before you snap the ball, what might happen gives you an advantage. Yeah. And it always will, always will.
All possible outcomes.
That's right, all possible outcomes.
Front or anything like
Odd front, even front, situation, where you are in the game, you know, everything.
As a center, would you prefer to watch film on your own, or would you watch it as a group?
We'd watch it as a group in a team situation, then we'd break down. But there'd be sessions where we would do, like Glenn Leonhardt, our left guard, we would do some separate film stuff, especially when we went up against John Helton. And I'm going to say some things on the film here. And we'd watch John Helton. And John Helton was 6'3", 255, and could run all day. He could rush the passer and get out to the screen pass for a 2-yard gain and stuff like that. And one film session, Glenn and I are watching for, you know, about half hour, 40 minutes. We're going through it all. And we're watching what John does and what he did previously and everything else. And I turned to Glenn and I said, well, what do you think? Glenn turned to me and said, let's not piss him off.
I've had some similar conversations. I'll just keep them at bay.
Keep them calm.
Yeah, don't say anything too offsides. That's funny. Yeah, we have those same conversations.
Yeah. So that hasn't changed much. I mean, film was a big deal then, and I don't know how much they emphasize it here. Or
oh yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah.
We watch a lot of film.
The game is mental. The game is
mental. And now with technology and stuff too, we're able to break down by game, like, you know, what every first down looks like. I can filter by defensive front, by every blitz, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I can really kind of break down predicting what they're going to do for each
right.
front, so.
Yeah, and that's important. I got a question for you. In training camp, did you have to fill in the sheets, the play sheets?
No.
In the old days, we used to get a packet of play sheets, and it'd say 45 sweep, you know, 800 roll out and everything. And we'd have to fill it out manually all the time, and they would check it. So it was homework. And we did that in training camp between practices.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So not during training camp, but in my early years in Winnipeg, we would have the day before the game, we would have a game day test, and it would be the defense's top fronts and their top blitzes, and it would be blank, and you'd have to fill it out, kind of thing. So that was from Bob Wiley, my old O-line coach.
Mental stimulation.
Yes, exactly, making sure people know what they're doing.
Okay, I got one more question for you. How much do you hit during the week? Yeah, I know the answer already.
we have pads on. We have shoulder pads on 1 day a week.
You have shoulder pads on. I wouldn't want to overwork you there, young man. We went live twice a week at live drills. Full tackle. But most of the time it was what we called thud. It was about 70%, you know.
First, like you wouldn't take them to the ground per se, but that was kind of,
First 2 steps hard, and then hit them.
Were you wearing this?
Yes, I was.
Incredible. The full metal face mask, I love it. Love it.
Should I tell my story about it?
Sure.
You see all the plastic is ripped off here, and I took off most of it. Yeah, compared to that one. That's my 85 Grey Cup.
I also love that you have the T-bar. This is not a very popular thing anymore.
Really?
Yeah. I would like to see that come back.
Well, yeah, they can't get into it.
You have to talk to Aaron downstairs about that.
But I took the plastic off mine for a reason, and that being in my day when I played, the headshot and the forearm to the head was legal. Totally legal, right?
Yeah, right hook.
Yeah. But I noticed that sometimes the padding on their arms would slip and it would get through to the skin and they would bleed. So I picked off all the plastic so that anytime they hit me to the head or got to their skin, they would bleed. So we played for blood.
Wow.
Literally.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. That's awesome.
You know, I can tell you stories, and I can tell you one, and this was, like I saw the Tweety birds several times. Thank you.
I think that's called a concussion.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. But I can remember one game at BC Place, and I'd turned to we were sitting on the bench, and I said, "What quarter is it?" He says, "It's the third quarter, Alan." And I couldn't even remember halftime. So I know that I was concussed. Yeah. You know, and we had a number of them.
Right. Yeah.
And that was wearing the good helmet, so you never.
Yeah, I would say the game has definitely changed a lot in that aspect because now they have concussion spotters up top in the stadium. So if they see somebody who gets hit hard enough and they start to show any signs of holding their head, wobbling in their stature, they're forced to come off the field. So they'll call down in the headsets and get that player off, and they have to be subbed out.
Boy, you guys are looked after so well. I can't believe it. Does it hurt to play anymore?
It does, but I don't know if I can compare. I'm not going to, actually.
That's an interesting aspect that I never thought of, that they actually have that.
Yeah.
Not concerned.
And again, I'm sure, it was the same back then. Like, it's very difficult as a player to be pulled out of the game when you don't feel like you should be. So it's always kind of a bit of an argument in the moment when somebody doesn't feel like they should be out, but it's a rule now, so.
The one way they diagnosed us then is just the dilated pupil. If you had the dilated pupils, then they would pull you to the side.
Yeah.
But most guys never complained, and we wobbled anyway, so.
Did you guys have visors back then? A lot of guys now like to wear the tinted visors.
You know what? I can't remember visors. Maybe the odd visor. No, we were pretty basic.
Right. You got the barbecue grill on the front.
Exactly. Yeah. So my exposure to the BC Lions when I was a kid was minimal. I can tell you one experience in 1966, and I was probably in, what grade was I then? 10 maybe. And we got Grey Cup tickets as a school, and they sent over our class, and we got to watch the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Ottawa Roughriders play for the Grey Cup, and against guys that I ended up playing against, Lancaster, Reed, and everything else. Crazy as right. And then we went on the field to ask for autographs. I made the mistake of going to the Ottawa Roughriders and asking them for autographs, and they just lost the Grey Cup. Bad move, Alan.
Yeah, not exactly a good time for that.
The Lions were not what I would call a big thing in our town. We didn't have football until I was 15 years old, and I didn't play the first year. Mm-hmm. Then I played 2 more years, and it was actually our head coach got to send one player, and he picked me, and I wasn't even the best player on the team. Okay. And sent me to the Lions development camp, and that's where Montana State found me and gave me a full ride down there, thank goodness, and then my career developed from there. But no, it was, we were a backwater, and the BC Lions were there, but they weren't a big entity as they are now.
Mm-hmm. So you went from, you played high school football, you said?
Well, it was called junior football, and we 16 to 19, and it was a community team. We needed everybody from all the outlying areas just to put a team on the field.
What was the team name?
Cowichan Timbermen.
Oh, wow.
Famous to this day.
Yeah, I used to play against Couch, I played community football for Coquitlam. And
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, crazy. So from Cowichan, you went to the developmental
camp in spring.
And then you went to college from there.
Right, and at that development camp, guess who recruits me to Montana State?
Who's that?
The legendary Frank Smith of UBC was a running back coach at Montana State, and he picked me with, this is my scouting report: great hustle and lousy technique. And they gave me a full ride. So there I went as a defensive end to Montana State. Defensive end. I didn't play. Went 2 ways at juvenile, but when I went to Montana State, I went there as a defensive end.
Wow.
So,
crazy. So did you get drafted then?
There is another story.
Yeah.
When coming out of Montana State, we had some of the worst years in Montana State's history, but the Calgary Stampeders were sending me letters. Now, the BC Lions were in the process of signing Johnny Musso out of Alabama, Ray Nettles out of Tennessee, Ron Este out of LSU, the Outback Trophy winner, the top defensive lineman. Yeah. And then, so they had no notice of me, but they noticed that Calgary was sending me letters and was going to bring me to camp. And BC said, wait a minute, this kid played his high school ball in BC.
Right.
He belongs to us, and that was territorial rights. We did not have a draft. So they sent me a letter, said, you come up here.
Yeah.
And so for the princely sum of $10,000, they owned me.
Wow.
And that was how it was. That's how I wound up with the BC Lions. Not because they were looking for me. They just
The territorial
right, put me on the team, and 15 years later, they said, "Get off the field, kid." So there you go.
Wow.
That's
15
my
years.
career
That's
in a
crazy.
nutshell.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yourself?
Yeah, for me, you know, I started playing Pee Wee football in North Vancouver. My dad, I didn't really want to play. My dad wanted me to get some physical activity. I was a chubby little kid, and you know, after the first practice, I loved it. And pretty quickly after that, he got us season tickets to the Lions. And so in the early 2000s, I was born in 1994.
1994. I was retired. By a long shot.
Right. We had we had season tickets for a number of years, and that's where I really kind of fell in love with this team. And I was one of those kids that would go down to the front row after games and try and get, you know, signatures and pull a glove off a hand or anything like that.
Pull a glove off.
And yeah, I mean, the Lions were so good in the community as well. So they'd come to my elementary school for different talks about whatever kind of topic and stuff. So this team and this organization has been very prevalent in my life, for sure.
Yeah. So I didn't find from the American game to the Canadian game, the difference on the line of scrimmage didn't make much difference. We had a bigger field up here, obviously, right?
As a center, I loved it because the nose was right in front of me, and I could get away with a helmet punch every once in a while. if I had a zero nose who was right ahead of me and his head was down and I could see my reflection in the top of his helmet, he was getting a punch in the head, which, you know, wasn't really a legal move, but it's hard to see in there. So I appreciated that aspect of it for sure.
The difference, I like the guy, I guess right in front of him, but I was a guard at Montana State and did a lot of pulling and whatnot. But in our day, you know, we couldn't block with open hands. We had to be like this.
Really?
It was like this sort of push, and it was very difficult. If you opened up your hands, they considered that a hold. So we had to block like this, and it was very tough, very tough. When they let me open up my hands and get into them, oh, it was a piece of cake.
It was over with.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's incredible. So if they literally saw any sort of grab, that was what was be considered a hold, hey?
What they let go in the NFL and on college players now is unbelievable. What compared to how we had to be, how strict we had to be. So,
right. I mean, yeah, for us, definitely if they're out of your frame or if your hands are on the shoulder pads or behind, that's a definite hold. But if you're inside, you're
oh yeah, clam on, boy, clam on.
A bit of wrestling for sure.
Yeah. I can tell you a story. Montreal, and I can't remember the year, but they had Ferragamo, Billy White Shoes Johnson, Mr. Stickum. Come on, Oakland Raiders.
I can picture him.
Blintikoff.
Okay.
Fred.
Yeah, Fred de Blintikoff and
his socks.
Yeah, and Overstreet, and they all joined the Montreal Alouettes, and they were going to show us how to play football. Well, they came out here for a season game, and we weren't very good at that time. We weren't even making the playoffs.
Okay.
We stuck it to them 48-10. And I can remember tackling Billy White Shoes Johnson in the open field.
No kidding.
But Billy didn't realize there was no blocking on punts in those days. It's only a 5-yard restriction.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He was looking for the block.
Yeah, he's going, what the heck's
He
going
wasn't
on?
going anywhere.
Yeah,
So,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, the field difference is definitely.
Oh, it's huge.
I remember walking onto the field in Winnipeg my rookie year, and I was like, okay, like the width was significant.
I think Ferragamo, and you're going to have to go back and look in the record book, but I think he held the season interception record for years and years because the 10-yard out was a 25-yard pass, and he didn't realize the reaction time of the defensive back. So stuff like that was different. But in the line play, you mix it up pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. I mean, I love playing in BC Place. I think it's the nicest stadium in the league. There's also some nostalgia there. I can look up and see where I sat when I was a kid. So that's pretty cool. But on the flip as well, when the repairs were being done to BC Place and they had the temporary Empire. I also was in high school at the time going to games there, and I thought that was very cool to be in that location just by the PNE, by the water outside. It was intimate too because it was a smaller stadium. So I enjoyed obviously playing in BC Place, but going to games at Empire was very cool for the short time it was there.
My experience is I got to be in the CFL before and after what I would call the salad days. They built the Big O, Commonwealth, BC Place and everything. We went from the small arena, and I could tell you how hard that field, this table's probably softer. And I could give you stories about that too. And I just might, if I'm rambling here on the mic. But I knew after coming out of Empire Stadium to going to the Big O, I think there were 68,000 people when we played in the Big O. And I knew then the spotlights and the crowds, that was big time. And I played at BC Place when we had 45,000 season ticket holders and 56,000 people in there screaming. And I hope one day you get to enjoy that because it's an amazing place when it's full. And it's been a long time since then. So going from Empire, it might have some nostalgia, but we hit the big time in the CFL when we built the big stadiums. We just haven't been able to fill them again.
Right.
If we could fill them again, it would be, you will have the time of your life. Yeah. You come out of that tunnel at BC Place with almost 60,000 people screaming for you. Yeah. It's an amazing, the hair on your arm just stands up.
For sure.
You're ready.
I was able to go to the 2005 Grey Cup, Edmonton versus Montreal at BC Place, and it was sold out with the old roof, and it was epic for sure. Yeah. And that was just as a fan, so I couldn't imagine as a player.
I hope you get that experience, Mike. It's really something, let me tell you. And we got Grey Cup here next year, so get your button here.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
In our losing years, and I would say our losing years, we weren't making it to the playoffs, and the problem, there used to be a lot of reporters that would write, they've got the talent, they've got as good a talent as anybody in the league, they should be winning. When Don Matthews came in here, he made about 6 changes, tweaked the team a little bit, and we're vying for the Grey Cup every year, immediately. And the culture of the team is the key. You can buy talent everywhere. And sometimes your talent's short. Okay, you can be talent short. But I played on teams that never made it to the playoffs that weren't talent short. They just didn't have the chemistry and the culture, as I call it now, to move on. And so I was so appreciative of Don Matthews and what he built here, because those were not my all-pro years. I was all-pro, and I'd go to the Grey Cups and see Dan Kepley, and they'd be having victory banquets, and I'd walk home with my Shenley. Got a little old after a while. I wanted to win, and so winning in '85 was everything to me. Was everything. Right. And that's how important the culture is, and we used to call it chemistry.
Right. Yeah.
So
one and the same for sure.
Right.
You definitely win with people. Like I love what you said about how it's easy to find talent, but doing it with the right people is, to me, what takes it
to the next level.
That next level for sure.
And that's how you win championships.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that with this group. I'm new here. This is my first season, and I came from a good group of guys in Winnipeg.
Obviously,
did it for a long time. Those guys are my brothers for sure, and I definitely see the same thing here. The amount of we have literally a 4-square game taped onto the ground in the middle of our locker room. We had half the team in there screaming, playing games in between meetings and stuff, and guys just love hanging out with each other and really working hard for each other. Nobody wants to let anybody down, and I think that really goes a long way. So.
True. Yeah. We used to have an offensive line breakfast, and we used to have the big breakfasts pre-game in the old days, and then they cut it out because, chemistry-wise, it was better to have your carb build the night before, and that was what you're going to play the game on. You need to play on an empty stomach. But the offensive line was so tight, we decided to have breakfast. So we had to have breakfast together about 10 o'clock, and we play an 8 o'clock game. But it got so popular that the running backs, the receivers, they wanted to come. And so it was only by invitation only that we would let these people come to the offensive line breakfast. That's how important that breakfast was.
That tradition lives on too. We've got some honorary O-Linemen that kind of
yeah, exactly.
We call them, and they, guys will ask, "Hey, when can I come to the next O-line dinner?" Or something like.
John Henry White, our fullback, he was so tough and a great blocker. We made him an honorary lineman almost immediately, and he'd always come to breakfast. And then the other backs would get a little jealous. Well, can we come to breakfast? I said, yeah, this week you can come.
Yeah, I love that.
So
that's great. 2021 season was the year after the canceled COVID season, so that was a lot of build-up and excitement coming back into that season. We had come off a Grey Cup win in 2019. I didn't play in that one because I tore my ankle, so I was in a boot for that. And so my big motivation was I wanted to play in one after starting all of 19 and then getting hurt before playoffs. We played Hamilton in the Grey Cup. And in Calgary in 19, pregame I walk out and there's, Alouette jerseys and Argo jerseys, and there's a good mix in the crowd. And but in Hamilton, against Hamilton, I walked out there and the only Bomber jerseys I saw were like my mom, my girlfriend, my best friend. Like it was friends and family, and it was a sea of black and yellow. And I was like, holy smokes, like this is going to be quite the challenge. And that game, wasn't quite going our way. We made it into overtime, and we made it work when we needed to, and that was one of the best feelings in the world for that one, for sure.
I'm going to describe the first Grey Cup I got into as '83, and that's the year Matthews came here. And, we turned it into a winning tradition, and we meet Toronto. I think we'd beaten Toronto both times. I think we're 13-3, and we'd beaten Toronto twice. We were ahead of them in front of our own fans, 17-7 at halftime, with the highest scoring offense in the league. Louis Pasaglia is our kicker. We lose 18-17 because in the second half, we can't even get close enough to kick a field goal. I remember at halftime how exciting the locker room was buzzing, and I didn't want to say anything because I'd never been in a Grey Cup. But everybody was bubbling in the excitement, and I thought, okay, this will be all right, and we'll go out. We weren't focused when we went out in the second half. We fumbled the ball away. Chapdelaine, they blamed Chapdelaine. No blame to Jacques. It hit him in the shoulder pad. He could have caught the winning touchdown with about 2 minutes to go. That was the most deflating thing in the world, to lose that Grey Cup in front of our own fans and having just a stranglehold on it at halftime and not to perform in the second half. Amazing. Next year, we play Winnipeg, and these are the years Winnipeg and BC just hate each other, right? They're great battles, great battles. We lose to them in the Western Final in front of our own fan. They go on to win the Grey Cup in Edmonton, I believe. And then in '85, we make it to the Grey Cup again. And there's a lot of us that are a little long in the tooth at that time. Like my all-pro years are well behind me, and a number of guys who were on the all-star team. That team actually, after I left, within 2 years, it was virtually gone. So we knew that was our last chance as this team. And we were more anxious than any other time because we knew there wasn't many more chances. And so when we won that Grey Cup in '85, it was a huge relief. We were excited, of course, we were screaming, but it was also a relief because we knew deep down in our hearts, this is it. This is the last shot we're going to get. So to win it then was wonderful. I still wish we could have won it in front of our own fans. So.
Of course. Yeah, I played guard, center, and tackle in college. I was, in my 4 years, I went left guard, right tackle, center, right tackle. So I was kind of just put wherever we needed a guy, and I was able to become versatile and learn a bunch of different things and ways to block. And
Good.
I don't know, I liked them all. Back then I was a little bit lighter, so playing tackle was fun. I could kind of dance around and mirror guys more and feel more athletic.
My story isn't quite that good. I was a guard, and I played 3 years down there as a guard, and how I wound up as a center. Eagle Keys kept me, and I'll tell you a little story. Eagle Keys kept me as a backup offensive lineman. The actual center that they made was Willie Postler out of University of Montana. He was 6'5", 255, and they started him in place of Bob Howe, sent him to Edmonton where he won 5 Grey Cups, so poor Bob. But we were in Toronto, and I was snapping the ball to Moorhead, the day before, just goofing around, running passes and stuff. And Eagle came over to Moorhead and said, "Can he get the ball up there?" He says, "Yeah, he gets it up just fine." I'd never played center in my entire life.
Really?
Willie sprains his ankle next game. They put me in, and again, the story is 15 years later, they say, "Go." Yeah. So, but that's how I became an offensive center. Wow. Fooling around in Toronto the day before the game. And I've never snapped a ball in my life.
Wow. And that was just the week before?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's how much center I knew. Right?
Wow.
And
it's worked out for you.
Yeah, and then I was expected to do the field goal and punt snaps, which I'd never done in my life either. So I can tell you
So you did all the snapping?
Yep, every single one. And I can tell you the day I fired the ball over the punter's head and scored for Calgary, too.
Yeah, you never forget those.
Oh, no, you're looking for a tear in the carpet so you can get back to the bench, right?
Get right under the turf. Oh, man, that's funny.
That came with the job. I didn't apply for that part.
Oh, for sure.
And that's how I learned to snap.
Yeah, I snapped. We were playing BC actually at the end of the year last year, and it was my first game back from injury. I'd broken my arm last year, and I snapped the ball off my own ass. And I felt it, and I just kind of closed my eyes and went, "Oh no!" And the ball hit the turf, and then we threw a pick six to Marcus Sales. So it happens.
Yeah, I know. You can remember those good moments and those bad moments. They're character builders.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm going to brag a little now. I was just inducted into the Montana Pro Football Hall of Fame about 2 weeks ago, and I got to meet Jean Stenerud, who left the year before. He was the great kicker that kicked the first 50 and 60-yard field goals in the NFL, and he's in the Hall of Fame there now. But Travis is in that Hall of Fame too, and so I followed him in there. Yes, I did meet Travis several times here, and when I used to go down on the field, and I'd walk along the sideline, and I'd say, "Hey, Bobcat!" and he'd wave at me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was good. So cool. But I never got to know him really, really well, but I knew enough to yell at him. That
that mutual,
mutual Bobcats.
Cool.
I'm going to tell you something. When I down at Montana about 2 weeks ago, and I choked up a bit, and I put my speech down, and I just spoke from the heart. When I started playing this game, I was playing it for fun. And then someone gave me a full ride to Montana State, and then someone said, "We own you, and you will play for the BC Lions." I was always playing for fun. I never strapped on my pads thinking I was going to be in a Hall of Fame. I was playing because I enjoyed playing the game. I became accomplished at it. When I first started, I was not what I would call good. I got better and learned the game as I went along. Yeah. The Hall of Fame things are just gravy for an effort that I put on the field. It was something I never aspired to, but I'm proud of my efforts, and if people recognize them that I belong there, I'm just internally grateful that I am, and that's how I feel about it.
That's awesome. I always say the moment that this isn't fun anymore, I feel like that's a big sign for me to maybe not do it, and I feel like I always would owe that to my teammates as well. Like I always want to be all in my career. And I feel like if there's going to be a point where I'm not enjoying coming in anymore or whatever else, then that's probably time for me. So that's kind of just how I look at it and how I will continue to look at it. And then whatever happens accolade-wise with my career, like you said, is gravy or icing, or icing
on the cake, whatever. You do it because you want to, and it's fun, and you enjoy it. Yeah. Right. If it gets down to just a paycheck, maybe it's time to check out.
Yeah. Just got to continue to remember that I'm playing a game for a living.
You don't have to grow up.
A privilege, exactly. I mean, when I think of Wally Buono, I strictly just think of the BC Lions. You know, he was around this team for so long. He's just the full image to me of this organization and what it represents. I got to meet him at the CFL draft. He was my first interview, and it was probably my worst interview. I was extremely intimidated walking in to sit down with him and G-Roy and Dan Durazio and everybody, so I'll always remember that. Yeah.
Well, I never got to hit Wally because he was always on the outside. So, you know, I'm the middle linebacker and a couple of inside tackles. But he was a very solid football player from Montreal. And Wally likes to tell me he was an all-star, but I can't quite remember that part. But as a coach, he's second to none. I mean, I got to play for Matthews, who is, I think, number 2. But Wally consummates what being a head coach of the CFL is. And he's proven it over and over. And I don't think Wally coached for the accolades. I think he just coached because he loved it. And that came out in his coaching style and his wins and everything else. He probably didn't say, I want to be the winningest coach in the CFL. He just wanted to coach and do it well. Right. And he did. Yeah. And he did a great job.
Yeah. Well, that was great.
That was very good.
Very good. Pleasure to meet you.
You know, yourself. Now, I hate to tell you this. I'm going to be watching you closer and closer now.
Good.
Be sending you emails.
Yes, you can call me and say, what the hell? What's going on with the protection?
Yeah.